I never meet people who have lineage within the healing arts. And Shanila was so interesting to have a conversation with because she is a fourth generation sound healer. And she's also the founder of Integrative Healing Academy, where she teaches people to be sound healers as well. She has a long family history of being in the healing arts, but doing it in different ways. And so we talked about, being an immigrant and how to make sense of what sound healing means for yourself in the modern age and in a different country with different practices, different culture and all of that. And she talks about her Saturn return. This episode is actually just one. I didn't divide it into two just because it really just flowed so well. So I'm keeping this interview with Shanila as one. So you're only going to get one long episode. And I think the thing that I always come back to about this episode is don't rush through the lessons of your Saturn return or the season of life that you're in. If you're going through a difficult time, it's going to go by a lot faster if you surrender and invite in ease. And the more you want it to end, the slower it's going to be. And know that your life is happening now. It's happening in this moment. So don't wish for this moment to pass, because what are we really racing towards? Death. Sorry to be morbid, but really enjoying the present moment, enjoying where you are, because these are the moments that really make up the human experience. The good, the bad, the ugly, the neutral, the in-betweens, like the running of the errands, the difficult moments, the really joyful moments. So paying attention to that. And I really loved what she shared later in the episode about when you're getting into wellness, especially if you think you want to be a wellness practitioner, a spiritual guide, whatever, you almost kind of just learn everything and anything. You learn about all the different tools, all the different modalities, but there's such an important part that we forget. There needs to be an integration moment where you figure out, after you've been taught, after you've attended workshops, gotten your certifications, how you are going to make sound healing, how you're going to make hypnosis, NLP, mindfulness, yoga, something that is truly unique to you. Your own expression comes through. How are you going to make it something that really honors the history of the modality and, the key components of it, but also adding in who you are? And integrating these tools and practices are really important. Sometimes we rush into just kind of doing the thing, but there is time that an awareness that needs to happen so you understand when I do sound healing for these types of clients, or when I lead meditations for this theme or for this group of people or for individuals, or do I want it to be executives? Do I want it to be moms, different groups of people? What sparks my joy? Because sometimes we can recreate our old structures and old habits into the new work that we're doing. I know that I did that a lot when I started Woo Woo Company. I was imposing a lot of the corporate expectations onto myself when I was a one-woman show. Still am a one-woman show, but I have support now. And really being hard on myself on what things needed to look like, how I should be working, how long I should be working, how hard I should be working. And when you start your own business, one of the most beautiful things, whether it's in wellness, whether it's a spiritually aligned business or not, or maybe you're selling a product or a very different type of service, is that you get to decide how many hours you work. You decide your ideal client. You decide what you want to create, what you want to share. You take ownership. You reclaim your power. You don't have to do it in a way that's been done before. You can create your own business, your own structure, your own way of hiring. That's the fun part that we oftentimes forget. We think about the service or the product, but we forget about the structure and the day-to-day operations that we're also able to create. Okay, I hope you enjoy this episode. Let me know what you think. Find me on Instagram. You know the deal. Hello, Shanila. I am so excited to have you on the podcast. I know we've been meaning to connect for a little while now, and we finally done it.
We
And
did
so
it.
we did it. We did it. And so I would love for you to introduce yourself, what you've been up to. You also have a podcast that's very popular that's also about spirituality, modern mysticism, healing, holistic health, all of that. And you seem to do lots of different things like breath work, sound healing. And so, how would you describe yourself?
Oh, thank you, Alice. Thanks. I'm so glad we got to connect to you. I think we've just always like missed each other, but in divine timing, we made it here. And thank you so much for having me. And friends, I'm Shanila Sattar. I'm the founder of AlwaysPlay Studios and the Integrative Healing Academy, where I train sound healers, breathwork facilitators, and I mentor healers in the healing arts. And so, as you mentioned, I do all these different things, but what I consider myself to be, quote unquote, is a healing artist.
Amazing. And how did you get into this work as a fellow Asian American? this
Shout
is
out.
this is not the path our parents wanted us to be on. They wanted us to be doctors, lawyers, like corporate enthusiasts, corporate warriors, and
True, true.
somehow we returned deep, deep to our roots.
True, true, true. And but I will also say, I don't have that experience in my journey of that. I'm a fourth generation sound healer. So my family and my ancestors were already doing the woo and the mysticism, and they kind of stuck to that. So
Oh,
they
I love that. Yes, I do remember reading that and it slipped my mind, but thank you. Thank you for clarifying.
And we do, yeah, we do have the doctors, we have the lawyers. My family's the lawyers and the musicians. So that's kind of the blend of where my lens comes in. But essentially, my journey into the healing arts is, I like to think about it, kind of came from all different angles. My background is actually in research science. So, like, I guess I was in that science track, but not by anybody's force. I'll put that out, I'll take the pressure off my parents, not point any fingers at them. I was a researcher in women's studies. So, looking at what keeps women interested in math and sciences, perfectionism, human experiences in society, grit, self objectification, different types of things that women go through in society, and how it impacts pretty much their decision making in what they feel about themselves, how they see themselves, what kind of angles they see themselves in. That's pretty much what I was doing for the last, I don't know, like 10 years before I kind of got into the healing arts. And before that, I was in tech. I had an award-winning digital agency that I started from my dorm room in college, and kind of like leaped around in all these different things that called my curiosity, and found myself nowadays for the last, I would say, 6, 7 years in the healing arts. And essentially my journey to kind of getting ignited or initiated or, awakened into the healing space was my own inability to take care of myself. Honestly, I found myself, very healthy in certain ways. I'm an athlete. I, play sports. I'm essentially like, a typically healthy person, but I was having all these sicknesses and illnesses manifest in my body. I was having my hair fall out. I was fainting. I was insomnia, name it, insomnia, seasonal depression, like stomach ulcers, like all these different things were manifesting in my body. And I was like, what the heck is happening? Because like I mentioned, I thought of myself as a generally healthy person. And it got so bad until the point where I was just like fainting out of nowhere. I was having like gaps in memory. I was having like panic attacks just out of nowhere. And essentially, I don't know if you have this experience, Alice, but when you're in your early 20s and you kind of go to the doctor, they kind of dismiss you. They basically say like, oh, it's stress, like, oh, drink water. And like, they're not wrong about it. We should drink water, and probably it is stress. There is, some kind of interaction in that. But basically, like, it was just always like dismissed, it's hormonal, or it's, like stress of school or stress of this and that. And I'm like, I really don't feel stressed. I feel like I enjoy what I do, generally happy and healthy and all this stuff. I'm not into, a party scene. I'm not a party girl like that. I don't have, that storyline going for me over here. But like, why am I ill of all of a sudden? I just manifested all these like illnesses into my body. And so that's when it was kind of like the big punch in the face, where I'm just like, I'm not emotionally well. I'm not mentally well, I'm not spiritually well, I'm not energetically well, and physically it's manifesting that I'm also not physically well. And so when I started to kind of just like pay attention to that instead of, the common thing for a lot of us who are new to life, where we kind of just like push through it. We want to like just avoid it and like be
Oh, yeah.
strong about it. And we kind of just want to like hustle through it. This like girl boss hustle culture and blah, blah, blah. And like, achieve through it. We put things on the back burner. And I like made a conscious decision. Like, I can't do that because this shit doesn't feel good. Like, it doesn't feel good in my body and it's going to catch up to me. And so essentially, I started to learn different holistic healing tools. First, it was because I was healing this back injury. I started to learn about acupuncture, started to learn about breathing techniques, started to learn about yoga, starting to learn about all these different tools. And even though I mentioned that my family is, I'm a fourth generation sound healer, there has been sound healing in my family for generations. It's in a different context. It's not in a Western world, and it's under a completely different lens of Bangladesh, right? A different, completely different way that it's practiced, way that health and wellness is thought of, and the lens how sound healing is thought of is completely different than how I practice it in the wellness space. And so I basically started to learn all these different modalities and martial arts, learning about elements, learning about moon cycles, dabbling in astrology, learning about sound healing, learning the science. And my scientist brain got really, really excited to kind of just navigate through all these different worlds. And until, as I mentioned about the healing arts, is that you start to kind of find the tools that work for you and start to play around with like what calls to you, what you resonate with, what your energy resonates with, and you develop your own way to bring that art form into the world.
I love that. And can you share about the differences? You said you're a fourth generation sound healer, but it's in a completely different context, continent, language. So, how did you reconcile those differences and what are some of those differences?
Yeah, for sure. So, the way that I practice sound healing nowadays is through crystal bowls and gongs using specific frequencies that help activate different parts of the body. And you're a sound healer, so I'm sure your audience knows a little bit about sound healing as well. But essentially, you use different instruments that have capacity to activate different parts of your healing bodies. But in Bangladesh, my family, and specifically my great grandfather, who is the patriarch of that lineage for us, is that he was a singer. He was a folk singer at a time where music and religion didn't mix. So the type of healing that was happening through sound and music and using vibrational healing didn't look like crystal bowls and gongs and tuning forks and Tibetan bowls and a lot of the little materials that we have nowadays. It was through voice. And so he would be collecting communities to do healing with singing and poetry and a lot of different things that people were being prosecuted for back in the day, especially in a heavily Islamic culture.
Yes.
A lot of music is seen as like the devil's work, right? It's seen as like evil. It's seen as like promiscuous, and there's all these different connotations that are attached to it, especially if you're not like looking at it from a Western lens. Even in a Western lens, there's like a lot of like music is thought to be evil or from the devil. And so in Islam, that kind of rhetoric also existed, specifically in the time when he was growing up, like 100 something years ago. There was a lot of different battles he had to fight in order to collect communities to create healing that was happening through expression, through the healing arts. And that was passed down to, his children, some of who, practiced law. My grandfather was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Bangladesh, but then his two siblings are singers. They're singers who practice sound in such beautiful ways. Their children too. And then it skips people. It's not like every single person in my family. And then now when it comes to me, the way that I practice is still still also for community building. I'm just using different tools to facilitate that. So now I have, extra tools. I have crystal bowls and alchemy bowls and gongs and my Jupiter gong, my beautiful Jupiter gong, like different understanding of frequencies, understanding of vibrations and brainwaves and da da da. It's more contextualized in the blend of the science and woo versus when my ancestors were practicing it, and my family who's still practicing in Bangladesh, their format or their presentation of sound healing is through their voice, is through community building, is through making music, making creative choices. That is kind of like a rebellious act. That kind of stuff is like a rebellious act. And as you mentioned earlier, Alice, like in South Asian cultures or in Eastern culture specifically, there's such a pressure to be the doctor, be the engineer, be the lawyer, be this, be that, all of these things that are not appreciative of creativity and not appreciative of the arts. And so for them to kind of like express and do and be confident and make careers out of it and like really be path pavers and visionaries for that, it's like, yeah, we are practicing differently. The context of where I'm growing up currently, I used to live in Bangladesh. That's where I was born, and I am an immigrant from there. Even though the context of me in the United States right now, the way that I practice, the energy behind what our practices mean still stay consistent and constant. And that's something that's pretty cool.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And it's something great that you can share around the dinner table as well. And you can just trade stories.
For sure.
So I want to chat a little bit about your Saturn return. What was it like? You and I have the same placement, Saturn and Sagittarius, so no surprise that we were both in the healing arts, both in wellness, and not physical wellness, but really emotional and spiritual. And so, what happened for you during your Saturn return?
Ooh, girl. Saturn returns. So the thing is, I'll mention that I didn't know about Saturn returns until pretty much until I was like at the shadow of my Saturn return. And at this time, I'm still kind of in the shadow of my Saturn return, the ending part of it, I hope. Right. And so for me, because I didn't have an awareness of the astrological placements, I wasn't really big into astrology or, looking at natal charts or birth charts or anything like that. For me, it was such a patient learning time that when I look back in it in retrospect, all the hardships, all the challenges, all the things that I was confused about, I honor how patient I was with myself, even not knowing that that is a time when like my world is quote unquote supposed to kind of get like uprooted and, all the questions are supposed to come up. And so for me, Saturn return, I started to feel that somewhere around 2015 for me. I started to feel like, oh my gosh, and all these big things had happened in my life too. I was like leaving a relationship of 10 years. My grandfather had passed away. I was manifesting these illnesses in my body for no reason, for out of nowhere, right? All of these things just kind of happen all at the same time. It wasn't just like, oh, through the years, we're going to spread it out. It just started to happen to me at 2015.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I was there with you.
You were there with me. So like we were suffering together, sister.
Oh my God. I wish like I knew more about it then. And at that time it wasn't spiritual. It was like right at the beginning, but it was because of that experience and for you as well that I was like, oh, spirituality, emotional health, and like, oh, I'm doing too much. I need to be more. So continue your story.
Yeah. I mean, like, no, you hit it right on the head. It's just like the doing was very apparent in my life at that time. I was running this award-winning agency. I was also researching with, universities across the country, and like on paper, it looks really amazing. On paper, it looks really good. But there was some like soul level thing that was missing from that. There was just like a different type of energy that was missing from it. Not that I mean that what I was doing was soulless, but there was a mismatch to the activities that I was doing in my life and my true expression, essentially. And, I always feel like I've had a really good sense of who I am. I don't know everything and I don't know what I don't know, right? Like you don't know everything about yourself, no matter how much you look at your charts or human design and whatnot. There is always a learning process of that, but there's an internal sense of I know who the heck I am, right? Like, and there's this internal knowing of that, even if you don't really know how that's going to manifest in your life. And I remember in 2015, like really feeling a strong sense of that. I knew that the actions in my life and the things that I have like generated and quote unquote achieved in my life didn't really match my true expression. And so I made no hesitation to like leave, whatever it was, like leave, like friend groups changed, this changed, that changed. I stopped hanging out with these people. I stopped hanging out with here. I stopped consuming this stuff. I really uprooted that. And it was incredibly terrifying, right? Because anytime you're just like, changing the way that you have, built your comforts, anytime you have like the things that are comfortable, you have, your comfort stuff set up. And then all of a sudden it's just like, nope, we're going to throw it over all your head. Like you're moving, you don't have this relationship, your sense of identity is being questioned. And it's like, you don't want to be a researcher anymore. Like, do you break up with that? Do you stay in that? It's just like, oh my gosh, this is so much energy all at one time. But in retrospect, like I'm so proud that I kind of just like threw it all out the fucking window. It's like instead of like carrying it with me, like and prolonging making really hard choices, I really hugged that version of me in 2015. Even that like hella depressive stages that I went through, the parts of me that I was just like, what the heck do I do on this planet? Like, who am I? What is my identity? Even with all those questions that were happening, I remember laying in bed just like absolutely depressed, and I hadn't left my house in like 3 days, and I had just like moved back into my parents' home after, having all this success with, quote unquote, my business and in tech and blah, blah, blah. I broke up my relationship, and it's like, like, am I just a bitch and I'm just not happy ever? Or like, what is happening? And I'm like laying in my bed. And like, honestly, Alice, like I haven't left my house in like 3 weeks, and it's like during seasonal, changes too. And I'm impacted by the type of chemicals that my body is generating. And I just remember like, there is something outside of this. There is something outside of this. There is something outside of this. And so for me, like really honoring myself in the, like in the mud, in the dirt, and then like creating visions for what it could be, for what I want to feel, for what like, I don't know the specifics of that. I didn't know that I would be in health and wellness. I had no like premonition for that. I didn't know that, what I do with mentoring healers and running a healing arts practitioner immersion. Like I didn't have that premonition in 2015. Right. And so in that time, I was basically just like, how do I help myself? Like, what do I do to help myself? So that's when I realized like I have to be patient right now, because for a lot of us who, if somebody who's listening is in your Saturn return or you kind of went through it, there is this like desire to rush through the lessons or to,
Oh my God. I was like, get me out of here. Get me out for years. Get me out of here.
Yeah. And I remember laying in that bed and I was just like, oh my gosh, I don't know like what's talking to me. I don't know about higher self. I don't know about like, is this God? Is this sort, like, I don't have the language for that. But I just knew like at that time, 2015, like something was guiding me and saying that like, be patient, be patient, be patient. And so for me, like all those times that I felt really, really horrible, specifically 2015, 2016, I ended up moving to California. I was like, I'm driving here. I just like drove one day, like my best friend came pick me up and like we packed a van. We left like cross country all the way from Massachusetts, from the East Coast. And I remember like during 2015 and 16, I was just saying to myself, like, just be patient. Like there's no rush. Be patient, be patient. And honestly, like that level of awareness, that if I retrospectively look at it, is like the crucial part of why I feel so aligned in my work and in my flow and confident in what it is that I do in the healing arts is because I let myself have time to develop myself instead of rushing to be the master, instead of rushing to have an expertise, instead of rushing to know all the details and rushing to, like have it all figured out. I let myself just like feel shit, just like let myself not know. And that's when all the beautiful things start to happen. When I discovered sound healing at this form of sound healing with crystal bowls and gongs and alchemy bowls at a music festival, and I was just there with my best friend, and I didn't know anything about this form of sound healing, and I basically saw like a bunch of people laying down and looked like they were taking a nap, and so I was like, all right, I don't know what's happening. It was like too woo woo wah wah, and my scientist brain was like rolling my eyes in the top of my head, rolling them back at the top of my head, but I was just like, I'm down for a nap. I'll just lay down, whatever happens, happens. And from that moment, when I experienced the tail end of this sound bath, I didn't even make it for the whole thing. It was just like the end of that. I experienced stillness in my brain for the first time, just like absolute stillness in my brain for the first time. I was like, wow, everything, all the noise, all the to-dos, all the to-bes, all the ways that I feel like I have to be and have to achieve and have to's, it just went just like flatline. Like none of it matters. Like none of it matters. Just rest and just relax. And then from then I became like really interested. I actually kind of forgot about that experience and went back into, my research life. And I was like traveling around the country, going to different middle schools, studying what keeps girls interested in math and sciences and doing research and statistics and all that stuff. And like, I remember those symptoms started to come back into my body. It started to like manifest, like, why am I fainting again? Why am I doing this? And I went into this like Tibetan shop in Oakland, close to like where I was living in Oakland, California. And I spent like 2 hours picking out like my first Tibetan bowl. And it was like such an investment for me at that time, like $75. I remember it was $75. And I was like, I don't know if I have like the budget to afford this.
Oh yeah,
And
I remember. Yeah.
you know what I mean? And I bought it, and I didn't know any of, what meditation, this or that. I would just ding it in the morning, put it up to my ear. I would breathe like 3 times, and then I would just go, right? And I started to notice a difference, started to notice my mood, my energy, my emotions, my reactivity, the way that I was like processing to the world, the way that I was communicating, it started to shift. And I didn't like attribute it to this Tibetan bowl, but I was like, oh, I don't know what it is, but it's something, right? And then at nighttime, I started to do it too, just like ding, I don't know all the fancy terminology of it for now, like I just like playing my singing bowl. And the guy at the shop like showed me how to play it, like flatten your hand, put it like this, and like you ding it like that. And he showed me how to do it. And then I started to notice like my insomnia started to like, resolve, and I was like going to bed at a certain time, and then I was like waking up, and just my body felt like different type of rested. And so then it just like I was hooked. I'm like, I need to know, the monkey brain in me is like, oh, I need to know. The analytical brain in me is like, oh yeah, we need to know all the details and like all the things. And so that's when the rabbit hole started. From then, discovered breath work, discovered movement, discovered, I trained in martial arts, discovered how all of those things call in together, how, astrology informs your wellness, how the elements, how the circadian, infradian, ultradian rhythms of your body and the earth are all, interchanging in that way. And so for me, I like to call, we're talking about the initial stages of the Saturn return, but for me, that was the initiation of the 7 phases of the healing arts that I like to think of. So, and so that was like the initiation process. Step 1 is like initiation, where you awaken your inner healer. You commit to your inner healing journey. And so then I started to go to classes. I was consistent. And girl, let me tell you, like when you're in research in academia, you don't have money. And when you're living in like Los Angeles, like on that salary, like that $20 to go to class is an investment, like it is like, it hurts your wallet in different types of ways. And for me, it was like that in 2016, 17, it was like that. But I found the way. I was going to classes. I was going to breath work. I was going to sound healing. I love, one of my sound healing teachers who I ended up learning with in in Santa Monica, California, Anna, and I was going to her classes and like learning how to ground, learning to tap into my intuition, creating awareness for myself, and then when I mentioned that I'm going to learning about the sound and breath work and starting to like learn the details about it, that's the next phase of the healing artist. It's like that discovery stage, right? Like when you get to discover all the different crafts and you kind of decide like, where as the healing artist, you have so many tools available to you, so many modalities. You have EFT and therapy and nursing and dancing and yoga and movement, like name all the tools. You have all the tools, but not all the tools are meant for you. And so for me in that time, I was having so much fun, just like, oh, like what does it feel like to practice this? And what does it feel like to do that? And da 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 da. And I had my hands in so many different things, just allowing myself like the freedom to discover rather than being attached to like, oh, I'm about breath work, so this is the only thing I do, or I'm about sound healing, and so that's the only thing I do. And that's such a common thing when you're in your Saturn return, that you feel like you need like something to define you. You need like the what's it called? Like you need the label, like, oh, you're the sound healer, or you're the breathwork facilitator, or you're this or that. When in truth, like us as people are just such multidimensional people that it's not fair to just like put you into like one category or one thing. And so that discovery phase was so important, and that happened like a few years after, when that initiation, like really deep shit, I feel like crap, my body hurts kind of energy, into this like more like, wow, this, I feel like the grid of consciousness has opened up for me. I feel like there's a whole world that opened up for me, like all these different tools, all these different alchemists, all these different bowls. Like, what do they do? How do these sound? Do I resonate with that? Does this resonate with me? Is this in my expression of that? Then it was like the whole integration. So the third step that I discovered, that I like to define in the healing arts, is this like integration of like letting it settle. So oftentimes we become like, and I remember doing this too when I first discovered sound healing. I would carry that Tibetan bowl with me, and I'd be like, okay, look, anybody who would be willing to listen to me, I would just like ding it for them and just do like a mini sound healing session with like my one Tibetan bowl. And like I had these like little chimes I would bring in my backpack, and like you ask all my friends, like they had some kind of sound healing session for me back in the day. I'm like, look at this, like it helps you. And I didn't have the, you know what I mean? It's like, look. And there was just this like absolute excitement around it. And then I think a lot of us, like when we're in that discovery stage, we feel like we have to, as I mentioned, just like attach ourselves to that modality instead of just like letting it integrate. Like, do you just like to experience this, or do you like to facilitate this, or do you want to learn more about, do you want to deepen your understanding of this craft, or do you just like want to, you just want to go to yoga and just like go to yoga and you're done with it, or you want to like really be in the study of yoga, right? Like those two are two different things. Do you want to just practice breathwork with a breathwork facilitator, or do you want to actually like dive into being a facilitator of that? And so sometimes in that discovery phase, I definitely felt myself where I was like trying to teach already before integrating this information for me, like before really understanding like, how does this express out of me in a unique way? How does my sound healing look different in this expression? Not because I invented like sound healing, or not because I invented breathwork, or not because I invented like, this like new technology. It's because the way that you're facilitating, the craft that you're developing is so personal, and it's an art form. Everybody can have the same modality, but the way that you're going to paint with your modality looks so much different for you as a healing artist than for me, and then for Alice, and for, right, like for everybody else, it looks so different. And so that's the integration process. And I remember like I didn't want to be in that integration. I didn't want to just like rest, because it requires patience, and like I thought I was already patient, because like in 2015 when I was going through all that, and I was just like, I'm being patient, it's been a year or two, right? Like it's been time. And so like in my energy, I remember like wanting to speed up and like, create the business and put it out there and like have the thing and like have the offers and like rushing through it, rather than really starting to understand like what my unique and authentic voice is, what is my add to the society and the culture that I give a shit about and the people that I want to be around and the people that I want to serve. And I made a lot of mistakes in this integration process because like I started to like make my work for everyone, right? Like it's for you, it's for you, it's for you, it's for you. And it was so unfulfilling in certain ways and absolutely telling in other ways. And what I mean by that is like the times where it was just like, wow, yes, this is it. Like, this is the group. This is the type of energy. This is the type of people. This is the, the type of language that I want to use as, a mystic who is blending and dancing between the signs and the woo. Like, I want to really be in this kind of community. And then at the same time, because of financial reasons and because like, I wanted to have resources and have offers and programs and courses and this and that it got me and so I started to have things that were kind of unaligned for me as well. And I remember going and like facilitating sound healing in like corporate offices, and I got these like amazing contracts and whatever, but it was kind of like soul crushing. It's like felt like soul crushing to be in like certain corporate offices where it's like people look at you as this crazy like hippy dippy girl who comes in and like trying to tell you about breath work, and you have like a crystal ball and people like walk over your balls and shit. You know what I mean? It's like it's such a different energy.
It sounds like you had the opportunity and also went through the motions of understanding what does it mean to be very mindful and to bring more awareness to how you're showing up, but more importantly, like understanding like what really resonates with you, what really makes you feel nourished. And so I imagine you said that during this time you discovered sound healing, but also just how to fill up your spiritual, emotional, and like mental cup. So what are some of the practices that you developed during this time?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like during that process, it's important that we play, and playing meaning things that work for us and also playing with things that don't work for us, right? So it's not just like playing for the benefit of it, like working out. So for me, it was like really coming out of my box and coming out of my shell and practicing my crafts in communities that I didn't know what it would be like for me. So for example, I'm one of the first in Southern California to receive grant funding to bring sound healing and breathwork to clinical populations, to implement programs in women's shelters, veterans legions, and LGBTQ communities, lower socioeconomic communities, and have breathwork and sound healing available for people. That is
Yes.
one angle of what I tried. I also tried volunteer angles. I also tried community angles. I also tried corporate angles. And so when you ask me about like what are the practices that I had, it's really about like playing and trying. Trying is a practice. And it's a skill that you develop because oftentimes we don't give ourselves permission to play. We don't give ourselves permission to try these different things. And we're like, oh my gosh, this worked, right? Like clinical populations, it worked. And so you can double down on that because it worked that time, right? And so you like double down on it. And now you're again in a path of maybe not really stepping back and seeing like how other things can also fit into this path. You get so like narrow-minded. You get, tunnel vision on like this worked, so I'm going to stick to it. I'm going to launch to it. So that play is really about like giving permission to like not enjoy things and to also really deeply enjoy things that you didn't know that you would. So the top practice is to try and to develop your muscles in trying. Because the more that you try, the more clear that you are on the things that you like and the things that you don't like. And I remember dragging myself to some gigs I had with sound healing that were exactly that. It felt like I was dragging myself to it. Versus there were other sound healing gigs that I was just so excited to be there and so, fulfilled before, during, and after that. There's a energy exchange that happens in it. But I wouldn't know that there was a difference between these two or these three or these four if I hadn't tried going to any of them, right? Or only stuck to, trying like one community or not one community, et cetera, et cetera.
Now that you've been running your business for a couple years and there's different elements to it, what does it mean to you to have a spiritually aligned business? And, how is running this business you have now different from the digital agency you had?
Yeah, so I like to think about healers who have any kind of business as intuitive entrepreneurs. And what that basically means is blending the masculine and feminine energies of doing business. And oftentimes, when we're in business, we think it's like, okay, we got to draft up the business plan. We got to know, we got to pick our niche. We got to be known, liked, and trust. And all this like regurgitated information that's essentially kind of fed to us from patriarchal societies, colonized mindsets, capitalistic forms of creating businesses. But in the healing arts, you have to remember that it's an art form. So it's going to evolve as you do. And so in intuitive entrepreneurship, you're blending the feminine energy of allowing room for creativity, intuition, energy, and and development, allowing the flow energy to be there, as well as the divine masculine of doing business, which is really about having consistency, having, having a structure, having some kind of vision and plan going forward, having the boundaries and having yourself show up consistently in a business. And oftentimes in like the healing space, it's just like, okay, I'm going to like leave it up to the universe and I'm going to just that's part of it. Yeah, absolutely. Like do it, use your human design, use your natal charts and use all of that to like, have it work with you. But we really avoid this divine masculine energy and we kind of run from the masculine energy because we've really confused the divine masculine energy of doing business and the wounded masculine energy of doing business. And basically what that means is the wounded masculine way of doing business is to tell you to burn yourself out, to overwork yourself, to, follow the blueprints strategies. If you follow the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 steps, it's going to work for everybody. And then you basically just become a parrot of like what's already out there, and you try to imitate and mimic, and you start to kind of lose yourself again in that process. Whereas the divine masculine of intuitive entrepreneurship is really about having structure, learning to work with your energy, learning to work with the seasons, learning to know what consistency looks like, how to actually hold energetic space in your body to receive abundance, to receive money, to negotiate contracts, to see, dollar bills in your bank account and be okay with that. And so for the first time when I was doing my business, I wouldn't say that I had any kind of awareness of divine masculine, intuitive, or, divine feminine. I had no concept of that. But if I were to retrospectively go into that business, I wouldn't say that there was something wrong with that. Honestly, it didn't fail. I just ended up leaving that business. It actually was a very successful multi-six-figure business that had, a lot of abundance from the time I was like 20 years old. And when I look back, it's like, yeah, the creativity in that was out of control. Like we were so creative, me and my partner at the time. Like when we were launching this business in the dorm rooms, and I had a work study job for financial aid. Like in college, you had a work study job, and basically you get paid $5.75 to work there in a computer lab. And so I would get like nighttime shifts, and there would be nobody in the computer lab, and I would just be working on this business, like finding people to build websites for, finding people to create designs for, and stuff like that. And it was so exciting. It wasn't because I needed, I was very poor, on financial aid, and it didn't, it was a work study, but it wasn't because I needed. It was so exciting to grow that. And then we also, by the time I graduated, I had structure of like, here's how I, outreach. This is how I get clients. This is how I onboard. This is how, there is a system that gets built into your natural energy. So if I were to say like, what would I do wrong? What did I do wrong there? It's at the end of, like me coming into the Saturn Return energy, is that I didn't remain passionate about what it is that I was creating. So at a certain time, at a certain level of that business, it kind of just became too automated. It became too structured. It became too um, energetically unaligned. Business wise, it can still thrive. It can still do well. Someone's take it over.
Yeah.
It can do like that is there. But like that's hashtag girl boss, right? Like that's fine over there. But there's a soul part of that's missing. And I really, really do think those illnesses that I mentioned that manifested in my body, all those different symptoms that were coming in, really had to do with that misalignment of creating something that is quote unquote successful on paper. It's very successful in material things. It's very successful. However, in energy, in energetics, it's not aligned to my expression. So I don't want to be creating websites and databases for banks and hospitals. I don't want to be, like doing certain things that aren't necessarily in my, not necessarily in my gifts. And so if I look at how this business has developed, AlwaysPlay Studios and Flow Breathwork Facilitator Trainings, my healing arts practitioner immersions, all of those things have emerged from this ability to blend the masculine, which is the doing, and also to allow the divine feminine to also exist at the same time. And for a lot of us, we are so terrified of this divine feminine energy, like blame the patriarchy, blame. But if we were to really look at ourselves, this divine feminine energy, it allows for growth, allows for you to change, allows for you to just be a freaking human that will have, evolving needs, evolving gifts, evolving skills, and evolve. That's the word that goes with that energy. And so here, like, this isn't the final form of like what I'm doing. Like, I'm not attached to it. Like, you can take that away, and like, I'm not attached to you calling me healer arts or sound healer or breathwork. Like, it is a unnecessary and irrelevant label for me. For what's happening in the business is essentially just leaving room for that growth to happen and being okay that your practice and that the way that you formulate your voice, your message has room for evolution. And the more peace that we can keep with the fact that things evolve and us as human beings evolve, the more fun you can still have, the more like joy you can still keep in your business. And it also lets you, double down on things that are really joyful. And it also helps you pivot when you realize like, this actually doesn't work for me anymore. Yeah, I like the numbers in my bank and I like these things that are, tangibly I can count on my piece of paper, but I'm on the soul level not feeling deeply connected to that. So allowing that to evolve will automatically create abundance in your life, because now you're setting things out into the world. You're putting out things for your clients, things for your mentees, things for your community that you actually give a shit about. And people have a bullshit radar for that. Like, if you're just showing up because like you have to show up and because you said you're a sound healer and now you have to do sound healing, it's like, no, said who, right? Like,
Yes,
you wanted,
the
right?
energy
Like,
is important.
the
Very
energy behind
important.
is important. And it's like, don't do me any favor. Come here doing sound healing for me when you don't want to be here. Like, you're putting bad energy into my sphere, and like, I work very hard to like try to maintain, and try to keep up my own practices. And so in the same way, especially when you're in the healing space, in the wellness space, that energetic sensitivity is even higher, right? Like, there's more of a bullshit radar. There's more of like a sensitivity with like empathic people. And so when you align yourself to create things that have, the vibration of joy and play and excitement behind it, it resonates harder and deeper than any like branding colors you can think about, any kind of like optimization you can do on your websites, any kind of beautiful pictures that you can take. Like, absolutely go do those things. Those are joyful as well. But the energy behind what you're doing is literally the megaphone that you send out for your people to find you. And so you're not going to have problems with your clients, finding clients. You're not going to have problems with attracting the partnerships that you want, and not going to have problems with, having the opportunities that make you feel aligned, rather than trying to replicate some of the opportunities that other people have and the things that come other people's ways, which might not be in your alignment to have, and you don't even
Yes.
enjoy having that.
It's such great advice, and I think so many people need to receive that information, whether or not they can apply it now or kind of like tuck it away in the folders, the database of their minds for when they start their own businesses, when they take that leap. So, if people have questions about how to connect with you, about your sound healer trainings, breath work, podcasts, how can they connect with you, Shanila?
Yeah, thank you for asking. You can go to alwaysplay.org and all the details are there. Flow Breathwork Facilitator trainings are there. Healing Arts Practitioner immersions are there. Digital courses and Sunday Night Breathwork Club as well.
Amazing. So many wonderful resources. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me, Alice.
For me, spirituality means a connection to myself, my higher self, as well as the universe. It's understanding that you are not alone and to really trust in divine timing. And something that I've been saying a lot to myself recently, and it's also the screensaver on my laptop, is that what you seek is seeking you as well. Now, we all are energetic beings and our mood shifts from day to day. But this mood also dictates how you feel, the thoughts swirling around in your head, your actions, and what you're able to attract in your life. And when I got into this space, but when I became a more spiritual person, I truly began to understand what energy meant and how I was showing up in the world and the energy that I was sharing with others. And so I hope this episode really expands your thinking on spirituality, and having this trust in yourself and the universe can really transform your life, allowing you to feel more peace, allowing you to feel more clarity, and most importantly, allowing yourself to connect with the truest version of you, your most authentic self, and then how it allows you to live an aligned life. If you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed because you're early in your spiritual awakening, or you're going through a dark night of the soul, or you've kind of been exploring spirituality for a while but haven't really been able to incorporate it into your daily routine or have a daily ritual around it, I would love to be able to support you, whether it's through a career clarity reading or working with me one-on-one for 3 months or 6 months to help you figure out your purpose, to give you all the tools and foundation to really help you live an aligned life where you feel happy, waking up, doing what you do, loving what you do. And you can find how to connect with me in the show notes, or you can always reach me on my number. I like to call it my hotline, 202-918-3414. So 202-918-3414.